Hello, my name is Michele, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Joining me on the podcast today is Tracie Bresnahan of Custom Creations. Tracie owns a full-service turnkey to the trade workroom supporting designers. Tracie is also the president of the Window Coverings Association of America, and she is sharing with us today some of her challenges in scaling a workroom. As you all know, these are the same challenges in many cases that we have no matter the business type. Listen in as we discuss changing locations, hiring, adding project management solutions, and the timing of it all. Enjoy the podcast. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Tracie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Michele. I'm so excited to be here because I'm always excited to talk about anything with you.
Oh, thank you. I know we've gotten on the phone before on coaching calls. And we're like, we don't really have a big agenda. And then we end up talking for an hour and finding things.
Yeah, it explodes every time. And there's been several of our mastermind meetings. I think I don't have anything. I've been too busy, and I get on the call and then I have plenty of things.
Right.
They come to the surface.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's because maybe we're not in a place that we allow ourselves to think about certain things at that time. But when you relax or you're in a conversation, it's almost like ping pong sometimes. And the thoughts start to come out and you realize, oh, wow, I really have been thinking about that maybe in the background. I think about a lot of things in the background of my brain. I don't know how to describe that. It's just not at the forefront because it's not what I'm working on. But in relaxed moments, thoughts come in. And then when you are given space to kind of pull those thoughts towards the front, towards the surface, and have a conversation, like you said, it always explodes.
And giving yourself space to do that, I think, is key. And the background thoughts, sometimes I feel like I can't turn them off, and I would like to just turn a knob and make them go away. But you're right about giving them space, or giving space to think about them and work on them, because in our daily lives and running our business, it's hard to. So you're just doing what you need to meet the deadlines and get through and run the business. And you plan a day to work on that, and then the day sort of gets sucked away. So plan, and I know that's another reason I value our coaching calls, because it makes me get on there. It makes me focus on those issues, and then they rise up, and then I do something about them. So same thing with today's call and with the storm and everything. And you said, oh, we can push it off. And I thought, oh, maybe we should. There's so much going on today. I'm so glad we didn't. I'm glad maybe the Wi-Fi came back for a good reason. Now it's forcing me to sit down and do this, and that's for the best.
Yeah, we're recording this on the morning that we had a hurricane come through, maybe 5 hours ago.
Which is unheard of in Georgia.
Yeah, in Georgia, it came all the way up through, and we have a lot of areas around us that have no power, a lot of areas around us that have trees down, and just kind of, it's kind of a mess out there. But thankfully, we both have Wi-Fi, and we can keep going today. Tracie, you have a full service drapery workroom, but remind us how long you've been in business and what your current organization looks like, because we're going to be talking about business challenges that you're facing in scaling and how to work through that. So before we get that far in, tell us a little bit about your business.
Okay. My business started full-time, I say, in 2003, working part-time before that, working for friends and so forth. Like a lot of people start trying to evaluate, is this really a business, or is this a hobby I'm really good at? Lucky for me, my degree was in apparel engineering. So I'm in the apparel and textile background. So it kind of fit along with what I do. So 15 years later, no, more than 17 years later, I've spent that time growing tremendously, more than I thought I would in the very beginning. But once I jumped in, the plan was to make it happen and keep it going. And that's what I've done. So fast forward 17 years, where I was by myself for a long time. I've had one full-time employee. We had our 5-year anniversary.
Wow.
This past week, with Jenny. She's been here 5 years. We've been growing. That was very scary move for me, exciting and scary, but we've been on a path to grow ever since. She's very supportive of that. And so we've been using a part-time as needed neighbor for about 2 years, really. sometimes more than others. Having another hand on the other side of the workroom table is what it started out being. That's been super helpful to get work pushed through. And now we're looking at another part-time person with some actual sewing skills that we could eventually say, okay, you're going to do pillows today, or you're going to do cushions today, or somehow put her on her own. So we've tried some different things. We've tried us bringing a student in with no experience and decided that's not where we were as a business. It's been a good exercise to evaluate what type of person we need here, what characteristics we need, and what experience we need, and talents and skills. So it's been a good exercise for about the last 6 months to really identify what we need. So scaling is where we are now. Growing. Jenny, fortunately, has so many amazing sewing skills and custom workroom skills, but she is also an excellent people manager, and she is a fantastic teacher. So in terms of training people when they come in here, she is great. She loves doing it, and she's very good at it. So score for me and score for our business. So that's kind of where we're going. So scaling is huge for us. Growing. We're also growing out of my home. We're on the terrace level of my home, which there are so many advantages to, but we're busting at the seams and the walls are bulging on the outside. And my husband and I keep redesigning our renovation based on this business. And so we've had some opportunity come up recently to possibly move out of the home that I didn't think was going to be financially feasible for the business, that now may be. So I need to evaluate that. Kind of goes hand in hand, along with project management needs to really handle the growth and all this is happening. I'm finding that that's a highlight, and that's a need that I need for my business.
Okay, so those are the things that I wrote down as you were talking for us that we're going to talk about as we go through kind of the business challenge questions: hiring, location, and project management.
Yep.
And Tracie, in addition to running a workroom that is trade only, you also are president of the Window Coverings Association of America, correct?
Yes.
And so you have divided time.
A lot of divided time and a lot of jumping around that my husband has noticed lately from working from home.
Yeah. And, I was president of that organization for many years and on the board for 9, so I can completely understand. It's all the more need to have a good project management system, to have management and people who can execute the plan without you having to be involved in every step, which frees you up to do that giving back and that service, to the nonprofit for your industry.
That's right, because I feel very strongly about that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have volunteered for this position. It's a lot of responsibility, but when I found out about WCAA and jumped into it years ago, I volunteered for the board immediately because it would force me to be there and meet people and network, but it forced me to get to know people that I knew would help my business. They would help me grow in the ways I needed, because you can't just do it by yourself. I mean, you can, but it takes a lot of extra time. So yes, I feel very strongly about investing back into the industry, and I feel like it's been good for my business. I've networked with people that have been good for my business. We work together because we know each other through WCAA. I have built relationships with industry partners that have been key and critical in making certain jobs come to fruition. There's so many advantages from taking that time and investing it back into the industry in those ways and with those types of organizations. But it is another aspect to my divided time.
Yeah. You and I actually met in WCAA back in 2006 or something like that.
Did.
A long time ago.
I remember when you came in. And I swear to you, I remember thinking, that girl's going to do big things. It's going to be big. I remember thinking that, and
That's
you have, and you still are.
Thank you. Yeah, I came in, and then it wasn't long after that, the second president we had ever had in the Atlanta chapter, and then immediately moved over to national. So, but I'm like you. I'm very thankful for the time that I was on the board and the time that I served. And yes, it did take time away from my business, as it does for every person, whether they're on a board for ASID or IDS or WCAA or any others. There is a time commitment. Here's what I also loved about having those time commitments on some type of a board or a charity or whatever, is it forced me to be even better in my own business, to allow me to have the time to go do it. So it kind of forced some efficiencies because there was no additional time, it made me look at things that before maybe I could have been a little more lax on. I could have let it go. I could have done things in a little more lazy daisy way of going through things. And it tightens up your schedule so that you need to get things done, and they need to be done right the first time because you don't have time for rework. Yes, it takes time, no matter what level you're at, it's hours spent. But again, the same thing happened to me, Tracie, when I had to pull back from some volunteering I was doing at my church and other areas. And I had to pull back hours from my business because my son had been diagnosed with dyslexia and I needed to teach him. Yet I still needed to make money in my business. And so what I had to do was get extremely efficient. My time now was at a premium, and I had to price effectively every single moment so that the business could survive it. And it did. And so I just think that's an important thing to note, because a lot of people are fearful of volunteering their time because they think it's so busy. And sometimes it makes you determine what's really important and only do that and do it better.
That's a great point. And it's easy to forget about that and not look at it that way, but it is true. And it's kind of one of the reasons I jumped in. I'm going to volunteer for a board position to force myself down that path. And it really does makes you a better, more productive, more organized person. Just like a lot of things that you suggest that we do, like the whole miracle morning, like you think, oh, I don't have time to read a professional book and take time for myself. But in the end, it does make you a more productive during your day. You focus better. And so that's a great way to look at it. And it's so true.
So let's jump in and talk about these three things. You can choose which. Let's do it this way. Kind of the way that we work through these business challenges is I ask you, what is the challenge you're facing? So we can say, based on the way you described it a minute ago, your challenge is that your business is growing and scaling. Like you said, the walls are bulging, you're busting at the seams. And so we're looking at, these are not necessarily in a order that we have to go, but just saying, so you're looking at a new location to have more space. You're also looking at what is your next new hire, and who does that need to be, where it needs to be done. And when you're in that new space, you'll have room for that next new hire.
Right.
And then also looking at project management as far as understanding project management and perhaps the technology of project management, because the more we can do with technology, it could actually lead you down the path of hiring a different person than you thought you would have hired otherwise. Right.
That's true.
The more that we get efficiencies in place and project management in place and process, we sometimes can change what we're hiring because we can do it with technology instead of with people.
Right.
Right. So that you can get more skilled on the people side that technology can, like technology is not going to make our drapes for us. It's just not going to, it's not going to do it. So we know the challenge. Tell me in a perfect world what you'd like to see with any pieces or parts of those three elements.
In a perfect world, I see us in a space similar to what we're looking at, where we can be more organized, more efficient. We're kind of broken up where we are now. We make the best of it, but we could. So
you're saying that your current space is broken up because you're in a home on a terrace level. So
right.
It's more like individual rooms in a home. There's one big open workroom space.
That's exactly right. We're in a small room that was my workroom, and that small space was great and efficient for years because everything surrounded me. But now we've exploded into what was supposed to be my husband's sports bar that may not ever happen. And so we've moved Roman shades in there. And so we work in here and then we work in there. And so it's a little back and forth. If we were in a big space, we could put two work tables, possibly 3 work tables in there, but we could also pull those big tables together. We could literally table 2-story panels, which we do fairly regularly. Wide
but with more
panels.
Ease.
Yeah, with much more ease and much more efficiency.
That's when you're even looking at things like, in some ways, shower curtains. You're looking at duvets, bedspreads, all those things that are multiple widths. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, we do spend a fair amount of time shifting, moving stuff. I said I'm the queen of shifting. There's another explicit word I use with that I won't use on the podcast, but I'm really good at it because it seems like I'm always having to shift something to do this and then shift back to do that, which I'm an engineer. It's not efficient. So we could be an organized, large space where we could work better and work more organized and more efficiently. So that would be amazing. Having storage, our businesses almost require as much storage as they require workspace because you've got raw materials and finished product. I source the hardware for all of my designers. We're a turnkey workroom. I have a beautiful space in this potential space where hardware could come in, be stored with its finished product, checked in, put with its finished product. Installer comes, he picks everything up together in one place. We're not getting panels from downstairs and hardware from the garage. And do we have all our parts and pieces? Did I miss anything? So that's huge. A place to prep Roman shade headrails and spray foam with glue outside the workroom. Like right now, I put plastic on the table, spray the glue, make the cushions, take the plastic off the table, put the fabric on. That's the kind of shifting that we're doing. So if we actually had these workstations, it could be dreamy and hugely beneficial. So that's kind of our perfect world scenario, and a place where I can work sort of separately but close to the workroom and actually run the business and handle the project management and sort of oversee everything and have enough talented people to be taking care of the fabrication and the details.
I love that. And let me just tell you, I dream it with you. I see it. So I know it's
You've been dreaming it with me for quite some time, so you should.
It is. And I've seen multiple workrooms of clients that we've worked with that have similar spaces. And so we both have seen those and we know, and I can see it. So we're going to also talk about what you've been doing to get ready, because I had you do some things over the last few years to get ready for that. We didn't just walk out and decide that we're going to go do it. We've been probably a couple of years in process watching to know when the right moment is. Hopefully
it's been an evolution. Yeah, it's been an evolution, and we've been working on it in the mastermind group because I knew I wanted to grow, and you began that grooming me to develop relationships with designers who I've met, formed relationships, now working with, and it's here. And so here we are.
Yeah. All right. So a couple of things that I'm thinking about just with regard to that, and then we'll jump into what we need to do to achieve it, how we're going to get there, some things to think about. When we talk about project management, there are multiple things about project management. You know, we talked about looking at multiple layers of it when we do it. But when we're thinking about workflow, communication flow, resource flow, like there are lots of different flows that we have to consider, right? If we were to build out your project management right now in explicit detail, it would be very different than what it could be in 3 months if you were in a space.
Right.
Some of the basics would all still be there. You still check things in, you still do things, but you may check them in differently and in different places, and you may have different people doing it.
Right.
So you still would follow, I am assuming, the same basic way of doing work. But I know we both have a friend who bought a business, moved from her home to another location, and has had to rework so much of just the workflow.
Right.
Right. And so one thing I would say is if you are in this, that it could be within a few months, I would offer that you do things more at a very high level. And then we dig in with the detail once you determine if you're moving into the space, because I don't want you to do a lot of detailed process work, right? Okay. And then turn around and have to go redo it again. So when we start moving into project management details, I want to work with you to make sure that we are doing it down to a level that we could pick it up and move it to any location over the next few months. And then we can build out the rest of the detail behind it.
Okay.
All right. The next thing that I'm thinking about when you're telling me about moving into this location is, again, this is where it opens up the opportunity for you to have more people because you have the space to not run into each other. We are the View of E-Myth Revisited. We have moved you from technician to manager to CEO, right? We would continue to be using Jenny as a workroom manager in addition to some technician duties, and then bring another technician to come in under Jenny in the role of seamstress or seamster, right? Or whatever they call that role. Whatever you want to call it, you know, people have all kinds of names for that. And then perhaps
workroom technician. That's
workroom technician. I love it.
I love it.
I love it. Let's use it. And then also perhaps bringing in some type of maybe a support person, because you already have bookkeeping and accounting. Those things are already outsourced for you.
I did just outsource that recently. That has felt very good to let that go. And she comes in my home and does it here. So there's questions and there's that sort of thing. So that has been phenomenal. He's working on cleaning things up, which that's been good too. So
yeah, so we're getting there a bit at a time. One of the things I want to highlight for you is when we are looking at rent. So this is the question that I always get, and I don't know if you've asked me this yet or not, but I always get asked, how much can I afford in my rent, right? That's the number one question everybody wants to know. How much can I afford? And I usually tell people, based on the type of business, some people like to look at it as a percentage of total revenue. I like to look at it as a percentage of gross profit, because as a profit first coach, I'm always looking at gross profit being the money we have to use to run the company. So now you're not cost of goods heavy, but you do have cost of goods because you are buying some product for your designers and running it through your company. And so I would say we look at gross profit. The next thing that we usually do is we set a percentage. 6 to 8% is usually fairly reasonable. You could go up to 10, but you have to have like a really great gross profit to be able to do that. And so I'm just doing a little math here. That gives you a rough idea of about where you should be.
I like that. Yeah. I like that gauge. I like a number.
Yeah, me too. So I would start at 6 to 8. It's almost like this. When you go to the bank to get a loan to buy a house, and they always tell you can afford more than you think you would be comfortable.
Exactly.
And so you spend the money, and then you realize you don't have any food to eat, and you can't put any furniture in any of the rooms. But
that's right.
By gosh, you got the house.
That's right.
Right. So that's what I don't want to have happen. And so one of the things that I would have you do, and I know that we have been doing this, is to do the financial planning and goal setting that we do every year, and start looking at how comfortable am I? And do I have that 6, 8, 10% of gross profit? Is it already showing up in my net profit at the very bottom? Right?
Is it already showing up in the net profit?
Let's say, for example, I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say, for example, your rent is $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
We calculate, just to keep the numbers easy, it's $1,000 a month. Well, if you were ready to walk out tomorrow, we should be able to see that your business can handle $12,000 at a minimum in the net. Like, it should be a net profit, and you don't mind it coming out.
Okay.
Right? There's an extra $12,000 of profit that is sitting there, that if I needed to pay it to rent, I would be okay. If you are running your P&L down to $0 where there's no money left, or it's just enough to pay you a salary and just enough to keep the business alive, it may not be the time to go out and rent a space.
Right.
And so that was why I asked you, probably a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago, I said to you, how about let's start taking a dollar amount that we think is rent and saving it, or putting it into a separate account, or doing it. And that's what you've been doing. Right. So that now, if you were to turn around and walk out, and that same amount that you have been paying as rent, in this category, you can now pay to somebody else. You're not going to miss it the same way.
Right.
Because you've been planning for it. Now, it may mean that your rent's a little bit higher than what you've been planning for. So now you just have to see, can I now absorb that difference? Let's say that you had planned on it being $1,000 a month, and now everything you can find around you is $2,000 a month. Well, now you got to find an extra $12,000.
Right.
Of course, plus CAM fees, plus whatever additional fees, if it's not all inclusive. But then we're going to go back and look at those financials. Then we're going to take that 2,000 times 24,000, and we're going to see what percentage it is of your gross profit. Okay. To see, am I still within that range? And that's how we start to see. Now, it may be that you start off at 8%, but when you get there and you have the ability to hire another person or move more effectively and efficiently, your profit goes way up. So, your rent could come down as a percentage. True. Based on the reflection of, you're getting your efficiencies in order. And so
Okay.
we can't miss that. But what we don't want to do is go out and have such a stretch for rent when many of these places are 3 and 5 year leases, and it's expensive to get out of it. And the rent is so heavy that if work got slow, you couldn't handle it. Another thing you can do is go back and look at your slowest months. Choose your 3 slowest months.
Okay.
And pull those up and see if you could have afforded rent, whatever the new number is that you have. Could you have afforded rent? You can pull the P&Ls up for those 3 slowest months over the last year or the last 2 years. Could you have added in the additional 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever for rent? And what would that have done to your financials within that month?
Okay.
And that'll start to give you an idea, because as we've been talking about, I know you've been through all of my courses, the Pricing Without Emotion a couple of times, the understanding your financials, and Master Your Profit, the Profit First piece. We've been through all of those. So, you also are already aware of how all your numbers fit together and how all this works. And so now we're just going back to see, could I have paid myself? And we talk in there a lot about your break evens. What does it cost to stay open? This now gets added to the break even cost.
Okay.
Because you don't get to say, sorry, like we've just been through COVID. Let's say that you ended up having to come back home. You keep a small space in your home in case it gets shut. You still have to pay that rent.
Right.
And so you have to make certain that we have reserves enough, that we have a plan in place that you can handle that if we have 3 months where nobody can come in, or we have, especially in these times, 2 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about it quite this way, but now we have to we have to think, do I have enough in reserves? Have I saved enough? Am I flush enough? Do I have enough overage in my profit that if for some reason my numbers came down because work was slow coming in, or we couldn't get fabrics or something happened, how could I handle that for the whole year?
Okay. That's perfect.
Now you've already been doing some of that. And so that's already.
I'm glad to have an avid Profit First student and live and breathe by it, love it. And I do my financials every month. And so it's nice to think I can just go back and pull those up and find these numbers.
Well, and it also probably, or I'm going to ask instead of assuming, when you've started looking at spaces and talking about spaces and possibility, to be able to look at your financials and know that for the last year, 18 months, 2 years, you've been putting back at least a large portion of what a rent payment might be, what you assumed it might be, or what you thought you could afford it might be. Even if it's not exactly the same amount, that has already got to give you some ability to see it a little bit easier. You're not making the leap from 0 to whatever the number is. You're making the leap from what you've been saving to what the number is.
Right. And I haven't been super stringent on that exact number every month, but I have gradually shifted my numbers that way between what I'm taking as distributions and what I'm paying myself for. Like used to, I paid myself for rent, and that came into our house as income. So I've tried to shift it around some, knowing that I've been looking at this for the last 18 months.
Right.
And trying to make those plans. So I think the business can easily, once I do the numbers, handle that, because I've been guiding myself that way.
Exactly. Okay. So with regard to people then, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let's wrap up location, then let's talk about people. So with the location, one of the things I would also, if you have not, I can't remember if you've already done this or not, start a list of what are the things that you need in the space, so that you don't go into a space and get like all googly eyes and then come back and realize it's not going to support what you need to do and where you need to go. So It may be that you put in there, especially for a workroom, we've got to have wide open spaces to move things around, but you want to look at things that's, I would say a lot is focused on electricity. That's a big one for us. So
it is.
Is there enough, what are the electricity needs and can it be met? Most places are not going to automatically have it because it's not what people need. But if you already know, here's what I know that I need, There may be more, but here's what I know that I need. If it's not in the space, can it easily be adapted to have it? Can I do a build out to do that? Because there's not just the rent cost, there are build out cost.
There are, and we talked about this sort of off the cuff, looking at the space Friday, because Jenny and I have had this conversation a lot, considering, like, when I say we've been redesigning our renovation based on our business, is we've literally done that. Our wood shops, if we relocate the wood shop into a separate garage and we expand the workroom into the wood shop, how would that look? And what do we need? So we've kind of done a lot of that verbally based on what you said. We need to actually put it on paper. And we did it a little bit in the space Friday. Like we said, okay, can we want to run water over to our Dufix irons? Where's electric capacity? We do need to build out a couple of walls. You do not want to see if Beverly's presenting a design presentation, you don't want to hear the sewing machines banging around in the background.
Also, can you get into the ceilings? Because a lot of our things are coming from ceiling drops.
Yes, and that was one of our immediate things. And luckily, the workroom space in this area is below a second floor. So all the wood floor joists are actually exposed and painted. So you can see literally you're going right into wood. Right. To mount things. And then there was upholstery. No one wants to listen to a stapler for 4 hours.
Or or not even just that, even just the
air compressor.
The air compressor.
No, so we looked at that. And again, storage and doing those messy jobs, spraying foam with glue and those types of things. So we had some of those that are always our key struggle points in my business now, or in our space now. We were looking at those on Friday, like how could we fit those in? So
the nice thing is just to create, just that bullet pointed list.
Exactly.
So that if you end up, let's say that space was 98% there, but it doesn't go all the way, right? And you can't make it go all the way and it doesn't work and you have to go evaluate a second space. It's nice to know what you're evaluating against. It's kind of like, it's the equivalent of us going out to hire somebody and having a job description already written.
That's true. And that's a great way to look at it. And it's also would be good to know what things we want that the space does not have. I mean, there's a lot of things the space I have now doesn't have. And so it won't be perfect. There'll be some things on the list that it doesn't have. So to identify those and know how we're going to work around those, like we have to do now, seems important too.
Or even knowing if it's not able to be worked around.
Right.
I mean, and so if you have the list going in, what it does is it keeps you from just being captured by the excitement of what's happening and makes it a little bit more engineering.
Yeah, because the lady I'm going in with this, the designer, she has to look at that too, because there's a dock door, but it's street level, ground level. So she's required to have an actual truck level dock door to receive certain things. So that's probably one of her biggest challenges that it doesn't have. How can she?
Can it be?
Yeah, can it be added? How can it be added? And can a truck get in here? So we did identify a few of those. But I love the list. I like the list.
Yeah, I think it's just, remember, part of the aim with intent methodology that we talk about is being very intentional. And the intentional is, what is it that I need? Because the things that you're talking about, they're not just nice to have. Those are the things that are going to ensure, to some degree, more efficiency in your business. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it.
Exactly.
And so if we are not sure of what those are, you can even have the list, and as you and Jenny bump around each other for the next month, go in and write it down.
Exactly.
I know I've been keeping, we'll talk about this in a second. I've been keeping an open document on my computer lately. And one of the things I would want to recommend to you when we start talking about, if we were to move, let's move now into the hiring conversation, because I think this is where my document comes into play. And so what I would say is I have this big document and I've called it a resource map. And I shared this in coaching the other day in the group and the designers in our circle. I created this great big resource map. And what I did was I started writing down every task that needs to be done in the business. Not my task. I didn't write my task down, but I wrote down every task that I want to hand off, delegate, have already delegated, like everything that needs to be done that I am not the one doing and don't want to do, so that I kept the things for me on a separate list that are what I consider my queen bee role. These are the things that only Michele can do. Okay. Then I went and took all of those tasks and I categorized them. These are marketing, these are administrative, these are project management, these are whatever. And then for the last week or two, as something comes across my desk and I'm like, oh, I hope I never have to do that again. I go write it on that task list. I find out where it goes and I go write it down. Or something comes up and I look at my, oh, she's already doing that. And I write it on the list. Okay. Then what I did was I created a second column and I put the name beside every one of those tasks of the person who's already doing that work. And then if the task wasn't being handled by anybody, I just put open. That means it's open to assign. Then on the third column, I went in and made a note of which things were free to be reassigned. Okay.
Okay.
So I have a list of the task. I have a list of who it is assigned to. And then I have a column saying, is it open for reassignment? And then what I've done is I've looked at what are the open things that I have that currently I'm doing and I don't want to do anymore. They need to be handed off, or one of my team members might be overloaded, or I might have a team member who's leaving. So it's going to be an open position. And then I can start to pull those together into like things, because sometimes we go to hire and we want to hire somebody that does a little bit of everything, but then we expect them to do it all really, really well. And we know that's not how it works. And so it's just been extremely clarifying for me to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Then that becomes a resource map that I can use in my project management later, because I know who's doing what. I know who's writing the SOPs if they're not there. I know which processes I have SOPs for, because these things are grouped together. And when I did mine the other day, it kind of shook out that instead of me thinking I needed one new hire, I'm pretty certain I now need 2 new hires, because the things that I'm going to ask them to do are not the same. And I want people who do what they do really, really well. All right. So if you were to think about that when you're creating yours, and I say that because especially as we look at E-Myth again, the more you bring in people under Jenny, the higher Jenny moves, the less Jenny has time at the table.
Right.
Right.
But she has the same, she ends up with the same problems I'm dealing with.
It is. That's why we have to look at what can be reassigned. So what it may end up being is, for a while, it's all hands on deck, but what is it that you two need that I'm not going to say you're lacking in it, but what is it that you two need either to support you in your role? If Jenny takes on some of the oversight that you're currently doing, who's going to step in to take some of those things off her plate? Do you see what I mean? There's this trickle down.
It's a trickle down. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Because we can't, if Jenny's already full time, we can't then turn around and say, you're so great at educating, go educate at the same time. You're so great at oversight, go oversee at the same time. You're so great at all of these things, answer questions at the same time. Oh, and keep learning new techniques and stay fast and get all of it. I mean, we'll burn her out. We'll burn anybody out.
Yeah, the point is to work smarter and not so hard and not so much, I guess I should say. There's too much happening right now.
Too much. So if you haven't done that, it's a good thing to do. It's like, what are the tasks that Jenny currently has that could be assigned down? Now, my way of thinking is that when we delegate work, we delegate it to the lowest possible level that it can get done properly.
Okay.
Because that means that you're paying less to get it done, but you're paying the right person the right amount to get it done. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want you to give it to the intern if it needs to be done by the staff level person.
Right.
But I don't want you giving it to the vice president if it needs to be done by the staff level person.
Okay, that makes sense.
So all delegation is pushed down to the lowest level where it can be done properly and in a way that supports your brand. If pushing it down another level means that it's slower, sloppier, and not on brand, don't push it down that far.
Okay. And we did sort of find that as we experienced bringing a student in here, and we realized inexperience is not where we don't have so much time to teach that we can actually get our work done.
Right.
And we weren't ready to hand it down. It was too soon.
That's right. I see this a lot in the design world where people will say, I need a junior designer. I need a junior designer. And then because they think that's what they can afford to pay. And then the junior designer sometimes comes in, they don't get the work done as well as they need it. It takes them longer because they're just not ready for all that work. Right. And so they have a problem. They've pushed it down too far. Right. Some then bring in, I've seen it conversely, they bring in staff designer, but they're not really giving them staff work. They're giving them stuff that really could be done by a junior level designer. Well, now they're paying more to get that work done. So you always have to keep an eye on what are the tasks that I'm asking them to do, the true job description. Can they do it? What is the level of work so that it's commensurate with the pay that you give them? You don't want to be paying $35 an hour for something that you could get for 15. Right. Right. The other thing we used to always do when I was managing teams, and Janelle and I had this conversation a lot when we worked together. We would, if we had any type of a group meeting, we would ask ourselves, who needs to be there? Because the last thing we wanted to do was have somebody at a meeting just because we were having a big group meeting if they didn't need to be there. Because now we're paying them to show up at a meeting that they really don't need. That's wasteful.
Right. While they're not accomplishing.
And they have nothing to do with the meeting. So, and honestly, we're all bored silly when we have to do that. So that what this does is makes you really think about what are the tasks, who's doing them? Are they the right person? Because when you scale, you're going to realize the whole goal here, and you've already been doing it, is having the right butt in the right seat doing the right work.
Exactly.
Well, as you move your butt and Jenny's butt to slightly different seats, the work might have to shift a little bit. There were some things, again, that are on your list that are going to be passed down to Jenny. Well, the only way that she can now shoulder that is to pass something down off hers.
That's right.
So with you having the ability to potentially get a new location and to scale the business up again, by one or two more people, it really gives you a chance to almost that's why I love the resource map as opposed to just a straight on job description. We make those and do those too. But what this does is gives me and you and others the ability to take all those tasks and regroup them. So it's kind of like if you had 2 or 3 people quit all of a sudden, you don't have to rehire to replace exactly them doing the same thing. You can move things around.
Right.
So you can use this as an opportunity when you move to change up some of the job descriptions, which means you might now look for a different person than what you would have had to choose in the location where you are now, because you're a lot more limited in areas to move.
Right.
So I don't want you to
I could see it changing or evolving to something different based on just the logistics of going in this physical space differently.
Exactly. So again, just like I don't want you to build your whole project management, and I'm talking about detail workflow around the workroom.
Right.
Don't want you to build that where you are right now. If you think there's a strong potential of stepping out, be careful with your resource plan that you're not just creating it for where you are right now, but you're creating it for the business you're trying to move into.
I love it. You really know how to dial down and drive down those thoughts.
Well, thank you. I do it all day, every day. But
yes, I know.
But practice makes better. Not always perfect, but better. And I'll say that too. There's not a perfect science to this. There's still trial and all that goes with it.
Yeah, there is trial and error and trial by fire.
No doubt. Before we move off of hiring, the next thing I really want to encourage you to do, and I know you've done this already, when you go to hire, it's more than just skill set that we're looking at.
I listened to a podcast. It might have been yours and Janelle's, or just Janelle, but what's really resonated with me was you hire character and train skill.
Yeah, she and I talked about that in the profitability courses and all that we taught about time and money and all that. So there are some skills that you have to come in. Again, if not, you're going back to equivalent of intern.
Too far back.
You're going too far back. So, I mean, I wouldn't go hire an accountant that didn't know how to do accounting, but had great character.
Exactly.
So again, there's a balance, but the point of that being, if they have great skill set and they don't fit in with the company culture, it's not going to be a good fit. That is why I pound into your head and everybody else's head that's in my group, mission, vision, values, your why. every single thing. Because when you interview for, I don't care what position it is, when you interview them, if there is not an alignment of that, of those values, of the way they get along with people, of the way that they take constructive criticism, of the way that they share criticism with others. If you can't get that worked out, it doesn't matter how great they do their job. It can destroy and create a toxic environment for you in a heartbeat.
That's true.
So the same way that you have your bullet points for going to look at a location, I want you to start writing your bullet points for what character traits you need of the person that is coming in.
Okay.
Okay. What is it that you need them to do? How do you need them to be able to react with you? How do you need them to be able to react with each other?
Okay.
I've had some of my clients who have said to me, driving into work and seeing a certain employee's car already in the parking lot makes them feel ill. Now, when we're driving, that's not good. When we're driving, it's just like that idea that when a client calls you and you look at who's coming in, or you see their name and email and you get that sick feeling in your stomach. Yes. Well, when it's your employee that makes you feel that way, that is not good.
No.
And so we don't want to hire it in, and then we don't want to keep it when it's there. We have to address it. So if you'll go ahead and start thinking about, the resource map's going to tell you the task and kind of the skill sets that are needed, but I want you to think about more of those softer things that are character related before you start looking.
Okay.
Okay.
I like it.
I know you already think about that a lot, simply because you're having him right now work in your home.
I do. Yeah. And Jenny and I talk about it a lot, and it's been a good practice to evaluate it, having our neighbor come in and work with us and evaluate how that has fit. Trying the student and evaluating how that has fit, because it was just her and I for 4 years.
Yeah.
And we just like meld together seamlessly, thank the Lord.
Right.
And so it's been a very good experience for us to see what we don't want, what doesn't work, and even what we don't like, by some of just the people we interviewed. Like, that characteristic is not really a good fit for you and I. And or even in this environment. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been an awakening.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I do encourage you to hire character and then skill, but also know what is the minimum skill for the position that you're hiring. They may not have every skill, but what is the minimum skill for the position you're hiring? Because again, you don't want to go hire an accountant who's never done accounting, but they're really, really nice.
Gotcha.
You don't want to hire somebody that's going to take all of the Roman shades and panels off Jenny's list if they've never used an industrial sewing machine.
Right.
Like, that's going to take you a while to train them to be able to make the decisions that she's making.
A long while.
Right. So that's where skill set does matter, but what level of skill set? What is it that are the have to haves for them to know? And then what are the nice to haves as far as that? Okay, so now let's talk project management. Tell me what project management means to you, because a lot of people use that term in a lot of different ways.
They do, and my husband is a project manager in building construction for a carpet company, but he's in charge of building their building. So I do hear, see, and watch him. I am an engineer by education, so I'm familiar with it and educated on it years ago. And I do tend to sort of develop that in my own skills. Like, I have some processes, they may not all be documented, but they're consistent. We know them, they're consistent. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. We're not just sort of haphazard all over the place. But as my business grows, I'm seeing project management on a bigger level. Like, say my husband works with his jobs, not the $50 million buildings, but something on a smaller scale, but very similar. So I've got all these moving parts, and I see myself as this puppeteer, but I need to be able to pull them together and know what's happening over here and make sure it's happening over there. Like, I know when I place an order, I do this, I check this box, I put this here, but how did I confirm that the order went through? That was a big oopsie recently when I never got the confirmation, and I failed to make sure that the confirmation came through. When it didn't, I followed up with it. So an install couldn't happen. So that was like, oh my God, one of my methods, one of my processes failed. So I'm seeing it now as technology oriented. something I can communicate with my designers. Like I did develop just a very simple Google sheet. One of my designers inevitably calls, hey, how much yardage did I need for that particular pillow? Hey, how much yardage did I need for that particular panel? Even though it's listed on the quote, she's out and about. She doesn't have the information. I would have to stop, go over to the file, get it, because, I want to service them and they know they can call me for what they need. But so I created this Google sheet that has, when I check the fabric in, okay, here's everything we need for that job. Here's when it was checked in. Here's when it's going to be in work in process and tentative install. And I share it with them so they can see it. But now, okay, I have to keep up with it. I have to make sure it's current and the information on it is correct. So I have places where I've got the Google sheet for this. I've got a spreadsheet for that. I've got a label for this. But how can we bring it all together and make it make sense? Because as the business grows, I'm seeing a need for it. But also as I jump around, there's a need for it. I'm in the workroom for 4 hours here. I'm at my desk here. I'm at WCAA over here. So I need something that pulls it all together so I'm not dropping the balls and missing little bits and pieces because I'm jumping around until I can get more people in and everybody doing their own thing.
Right. Okay. So I will tell you this, with project management, I think there's more than one aspect. There's the external project management, which is you with the designer. And then there are certain things that are more internal project management, which is you with Jenny and all the other stuff that comes from behind. There may be, in some cases, based on what you want to do, there may be one system that works for everything. So everybody logs into it and everybody can see, and you can give permissions so that, you can have some internal management and that kind of thing.
Right.
But I will tell you this, any project management system is only as good as you following through with every single thing all the time. Just like QuickBooks. Somebody can say I have QuickBooks, but man, my numbers are a mess. Why? Well, I haven't balanced anything. I don't put in my invoices and I haven't, updated that I put money in the bank. Well, then does you no good to have a system that you're not using. So I will say that consistency is key. Like when you said a minute ago, my process was broken. It may not have been the process that was broken as much as the execution of the process that was broken.
I think execution is it. And that's probably where dropping the ball is, in the execution phase
of it. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Where I'm seeing little things come up. And I'd say for a long time, I could one of my bragging points is we're full service and we take care of all the details. Well, if you're dropping some of the details in the execution, you're not taking care of the details. That's
right. And so a lot of it does come down to that consistency and that execution of like almost being so regimented that when you get up in the morning, you're going to brush your teeth.
Right.
You're not going to not brush your teeth. You're going to brush your teeth before you go to bed. You're going to brush your teeth. So just these are just habits of work that we just do. And that's the same thing that whatever you put in place has to be. Now, there are lots of project management systems and lots of ways to do it out there. But before you make the decision on which one you want to choose, I would implore you to create that list that says, here's the things that I want to be able to do with the client. Like this is the view I want them to see or the information I want them to have access to. And this is what I need to do for us internally that nobody has access to.
Okay.
So in other words, what you've done is you've created your evaluation criteria before you go trying out all the different project management systems.
Okay.
I'll give you another prime example. There are designers out here who are using Ivy and Midoma and some of the others to manage the client facing portion and to in some cases manage the product and the sale. But neither of those can manage the full financials of their company. So they're having to take the data from that and move it into QuickBooks or into an accounting software to be able to manage, because you don't put your business expenses in those systems.
Right.
They also then neither of or a lot of those project management facing systems don't manage the behind the scenes, the workflow of information. It doesn't handle when the contract gets sent out, when certain things don't, so that they're all using other things. They're using things like Airtable, Asana, Trello, Basecamp, Dubsado to create workflows and project management that's more internal for their business. A lot of workrooms are using Airtable. I use Airtable to manage my podcast. And Airtable is like a big glorified spreadsheet, but it allows you to have drop downs so we can move things to statuses. You can assign people to see certain views, and so they can only see certain things. That you can take out what they don't need to see, and it's actually very robust. And so, it really comes down to what is it you're trying to show them? What is it you want to do? But even with my podcast being managed through Airtable, if I schedule a podcast and I don't go in there and say it's scheduled, the people down the line that need that information would never know.
Right. I gotcha.
So it's still, whatever you create, it still hangs on you and Jenny or whoever is going to be keeping up with that information. They have to keep up with the information. Exactly. It now has to be part of the process.
Well, I've learned that with my simple little Google sheet. It's not effective for Linda to go in and see if the yardage is received if I didn't put in the yardage in the fabric.
Right. And so then what we would do is we would take a step back and look at your standard operating procedures. Exactly. And that might be that when we receive fabric, number one, open Google Sheet. Number two, and then you go through the process so that you prompt yourself on what to do. So even before you go further, I would go into all of your operating procedures and I would prompt what system they need to open to track whatever data is coming out of that activity. It's just like saying to somebody, I need you to give me your billable hours so that I can go into QuickBooks and send an invoice. Well, if they didn't keep up with their billable hours, then how do you do that? So it's just those habits that we have to create. So I would start looking at that as well. And so if you got your evaluation list of project management, if you have separated it between here's what I need to manage a project, like a client project, and what do I need to manage across client projects internally?
Right.
Because if you have 6 designers, designer 6 doesn't need to look at the information from designer 1. So what do they need to see? And then what do you need to have in the background for each of those and across them?
Okay.
And then use that to start the evaluation process. I'll tell you another thing I love to do is, like, let's say that Asana was one of the ones you looked at. Okay. Just because that's one Asana, I've heard it all the ways. But let's say that's one that you looked at. If I were to go out and do, number one, I always like to do the free trial. I like to look at what they say they offer. And then I love to go in and Google who is the competitor to Asana. And it will give you a whole list of all the competition of Asana. And then I start walking through and checking it out. You can do any technology platform practically and go in there and say, who is the competitor to this? Who is the competitor to Basecamp? Who's the competitor to Trello? And it'll give you a whole list of it.
Okay. So and finding, we went through this recently. You and I we were evaluating or going over project management on our interior designer circle webinars. And it was just all too much at the time. And you're like, all right, if you don't have the bandwidth for it now, don't do it.
Right.
So it needs to be, I'm assuming it needs to be a time where, okay, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I am prepared and have time set aside to evaluate this and look at it. Because I really didn't think about that. I was like, well, I'll just get this. And I'm pretty intuitive and user friendly with things. But I found that was not the way that works. Like you don't do that when you've got 4 installs this week. And well, yeah.
All right. So truth, hashtag truth. Here's the thing. First of all, there is an evaluation process on what is the right technology for you. The technology, you remember this. There was Dream Draper and Minutes Matter Studio. And both of them, if you were looking for an outcome, were creating the same outcome of giving us windows that we could put window treatments on, that we could give a visual to the client.
Right.
But different people had their favorites based on the way they interact with technology. What was intuitive to them when they went into the program. None of us would have bought that program and thought that the next day we could have created a rendering that looked like the owners were creating with that program.
Right.
It takes time. So what you first do is you identify what your needs are, what you know. Now you're going to find things that all of these technologies can do that you hadn't even considered.
Right. And do you find that people evaluate 2 to 3 different ones?
Yes.
Like 4 to 5? Like it seems like It
I
seems
usually like to do
overwhelming.
about 3. I usually like to do 3. Okay.
Okay.
But first I write down, what is it I need it to do? What is it I think I need it to do?
And am I going to be able to tell from looking on their website,
Yes.
this is what our system does for you?
Yes.
That this is the one I need to try? Because that
A lot
seems
of them you
overwhelming
can.
too.
Mhm.
Okay.
When you pull it up, it says, here's what we do. They have videos, you can watch them. And if you go out and Google and then Google who they're competing against, there are a lot of spreadsheets out there that show you every single one, and they compare them.
Okay, like if you're going to buy a phone.
Like
okay.
Yep, same kind of thing. All right.
Okay.
So the first is you go into it knowing what you think you want. Then you go through a research phase, what technology works. I've had plenty of people, if you listen to them, well, I used to be on Basecamp, then I jumped to Trello, and then I jumped to Asana, because they're learning. But the better that you spend the time in doing what you think you need and doing that evaluation, the less likely you're going to have to jump.
Yeah, it seems easier than jumping.
It's
Jumping
so much
sounds
easier
very
than
time
jumping.
confusing, like a rabbit hole.
Yes, right. The next thing you do is, when you're looking at that technology and you're looking at what it can do, this is where I want you to think, just like you are with the location. If my business grows, I may not need what they're saying right now, but can I see a need for that in the future? Because what I don't want you to do is buy technology that is similar to the space that you're in, and within 6 months, you're busting at the seams of what it can do.
Okay.
We want to have room to grow in the technology, okay?
Right.
Or in that application. So if you're looking at one of the project management applications and you've narrowed it down, sometimes they narrow themselves down to 2 or 3 based on what you need it to do. Also, then you can look at the price. You can look at it. Is it month to month? Is it a year only? What do they say about the learning curve? Can I find people to help me on this? All those things come as part of the evaluation. All right. Then what you do is you would go in and do the 7, 14, 21 day free trials that most of them have, and just get in there and watch the tutorials. It takes time. Move around, try it. Does this seem intuitive to me? Does this seem intuitive to me? What do I like to interact with? That's why some people like iCal, some people like Google, some people like Microsoft calendars. There are all these different calendars, just like planners.
It seems to be a huge time commitment. Not that it's not worth it. I mean, the business needs it. You got to do it. But in the beginning, it's a very daunting time commitment.
Yes.
When you're looking at how many hours you're working a week.
Yes.
But I know in the end, it's going to be better for the business. It's just a matter of planning for it, I guess, and the correct evaluation.
Absolutely. I want you to compare it to onboarding a brand new employee.
Yeah.
Because this technology app is going to take the place of an employee that would be sitting down, running around, trying to do all these things.
Right.
So the more that you write down, I'm going to put in air quotes, the job description that you need the app to do.
Right.
Then you interview the applications. Then you hire an app. Now you have to onboard the app, which may also cause you to rethink how you do some things, just like if it were a human that walked through your door.
Right.
But once you've done it, it should take some off of you and be done a lot more with ease that frees you up for later. Remember that whole conversation we've had, the difference between urgent, important, and significant? This is significant.
Right.
So it's a time multiplier. It multiplies time later by doing it. But building out a project management system, it is not a weekend, let's get it going, jump in there and go, because it makes you stop and rethink your process. It makes you rethink your naming structures. It makes you rethink how information flows through your company, communication flows through your company, workflow flows through your company. And that's why it should not be a quick giddy up, let's go. It should be a more thoughtful process to get through, because once you've done that thinking, it's just like us. We wouldn't run to the table and go make a complicated balance.
Right.
We would sit and we would think about it, and we would lay it out in our head, and we would think about, how do we move the fabric, and can I get it out of this fabric, and what if I did that, and would this be an easier way, and how can I hide that seam? Like, you're thinking through the process the whole time. You've spent hours before you ever step up to the table. That's exactly what this is going to require.
And that's such a fundamental way to look at it, because if somebody said, okay, I need a really odd pillow like this, that, and the other, that's exactly what I would start doing. But for this, it's kind of a remain in avoidance instead of tackling like just like I would tackle anything
it's
else.
the same. Yep. Just start scheming it. We have to give ourselves, as we started the whole beginning of the podcast, we got to give ourselves the space to do it, which means it can't be crammed into a 15 or 30-minute opening that we have somewhere.
That's right.
I blocked, and when I've been doing some evaluations, and when I've been doing mine and I'm working through it and even working through all of my own, I'm blocking hours. I usually ask you guys to block a minimum of 3 hours to just, a day could be overwhelming. It could be too much and you start to get shut down. But a morning is like, 8 to 11 or 9 to 12, like just the morning. And then that's all that I can get done. I'll block another morning, or an afternoon later. But 2 to 3 hours is enough for you to get into it and get immersed in it and not feel like you're just starting to understand it and you got to stop and run, go do the next thing.
Yeah. And I'm bad about squeezing in. Oh, I'll do that for 30 minutes. I'll do that for an hour. I'll do that before Jenny comes into work. Yeah. And it's not enough.
This is where you got to sit and think through it. And you got to you got to build in the time to do it well and to have a process that supports you now and where you're going. The time that you spend at the beginning. That's why, I come from the software world, and people, based on some of the software that we used to sell, it could be a year-long sales process. Like there were full on evaluations of everything because it meant processes needed to change. It meant, think about your, technology from an engineering and textile. They wouldn't go out and just buy a whole big machine that changed the way they produced all of these things without thinking through every complexity or every area of complexity that was involved. This is no different. We kind of think of app as just throw it out. This isn't just like a task manager. This is a project. This is the whole project.
Right. So let me ask you a specific question. In the Interior Designer Circle webinars, we talked a lot about Hive. Do you have 3 or 4 that you would throw my way, knowing my business, knowing my processes to a certain degree, that, it could take me from having to look at 10 to look at 3 or 4?
Sure. So I would suggest you and I'll dig in deeper on if we're talking client focused or external or whatever. Right. I would almost say that I'd like the idea of either the Google Sheet or Airtable for your clients, for the designers to look at, because it's going to be a lot more narrow. Now that could change based on the way that we implement some other things.
Yeah, it's pretty basic what my designers need to see.
That's exactly right. So we don't need to, and different project management tools require people to have a seat, if you will, to be able to get in to look at it. So we don't want to pay more than we need to pay.
Right.
Right now, a lot of my clients, I'll tell you that the top 3 for internal project management. So this isn't talking Ivy, Mydoma. It's not that type of project. This is internal project management outside of using Excel and Google Sheets, which a lot of people do. There's a heck of a lot of management through Google Sheets and all that. But I'll tell you, when you're looking at workflow management and all that, I would say the top 3 that I see are, the top 2 that I see would be Asana and Basecamp. A lot are also using Trello. So Basecamp, Asana, and Trello. But I'll tell you my new favorite, and it's Hive. And I'll put a link down at the bottom if anybody wants. I was
going to ask you about that because I've already been introduced to that. So that's still at the top of your list?
It is. But let me tell you why it's at the top of my list, because I went through, and I use Asana too, because I'm in the middle of some transitions. But here's what I needed for my clients. I needed a project management system that allowed them to manage resources, employees, and calendar across projects.
Okay.
Not just within projects. And Asana and Trello and Basecamp, they do not do resource management across projects. So I needed you to be able to look at your company across 6 to 10 projects versus having to go into each project to see what's happening.
And I guess that would apply to me. I mean, at first I was thinking, no, I don't have 5 designers working on 10 different projects, but I do have 10 designers I'm working for across the project. So it's the same application in a different way. And I think I had tunnel vision about that.
Yes. And because we might want to look at, you may only have 2 seamstresses or what do we call them? Workroom technicians.
Yeah.
So, but their time has to be managed. If you're not running everything in a straight flow, which means you're only working on one project at a time. If they're doing some on this project, some on this project, some on that project, which is, again, what most of my designers are doing, they've got multiple things happening at a time. This
Right.
one might be in a quote process while this one is being in that we're working on the pillows for this one, and we're working on the panels for that one. Some workrooms go in and do like, they're going to do all panels this week. So they get all their panels ready for 2 or 3 jobs and they run that through. Again, it's based on how you do your work. But I wanted them to be able to manage employees' resources across multiple projects and to be able to see it rolled up at a company level. None of the others do that.
Okay.
And that was important as I support my clients, that we roll all the way up to the company, because that's the piece they were missing. The question was always, when can I take the next job? Well, if this job gets pushed out, job 1, right? Or task 1 of job 1 or whatever, there's this ripple effect. And they were having to manually go change calendars and manually figure that out. Or when can I take the next consult, but I can't onboard the client to get the job started. And so there were the pieces and parts that were kind of dropping in from project C into the middle of project A, just from a timeline calendar perspective. And they had no way to see that. And Hive allows you to roll all the way up to look at it for the company as the project. Like, what does the whole company have? Now let me come down and look at what does an employee have. So I could pull up Tracie and I could see everything that Tracie is assigned across 10 projects. I could manage Tracie's time across all 10 of those.
And for me, it may be, here's this designer and here's their projects.
Correct.
We've got this project A at this is in the quoting phase, project B is being ordered, and C is in the workroom, and D is being installed. Okay.
And you have to jump across all of them. And a lot of the others will manage all that, but you have to go into A to see what you have to do. You have to go into B. And we can't tell in some of the other project management systems that you're overloaded. Whereas in Hive, I could look at Tracie and see Tracie's overloaded without having to go into each individual one to manage.
Okay.
But
wow.
I would say if you wanted to look, I would have you look at Asana and I would have you look at Hive. Those would be the 2 that I would probably choose for you.
Okay.
Knowing your business, because we've coached together so long.
Exactly.
And then I would say, if you're looking at what you want your clients to see, if you really wanted to keep it simplistic, you might just want to do something like a Google Sheet or an Airtable.
I'll probably just keep what I've got. I mean, right now, the ones that I have the most projects with, they do have the Google Sheet. Or they've got an assistant, like, Beverly's just hired a new person. She's got the Google Sheet. So that's going to be her new task.
Because if not, you've got to go train them. You got to now introduce a new app to them, new technology to them.
I think it's easiest just to stay where we are. It's really just about communicating information.
Correct.
And it's easy and simple and it's already there. And yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. So I guess you got a lot to do. Let's talk about timing for just a second and then we'll wrap it up. So the first thing that I know that you're looking at is the location. I know that's kind of come up real quickly. So let that play out. Don't overstress yourself on all these other things. Start by just doing what we talked about and list out, what do you know you need in a location? Go ahead and get that done relatively quickly, because it's even going to help you in this next process of build out and making a selection on location, and look at what we talked about with the rent as a percentage.
Okay.
I've got those. Yep. Start there.
The top 2. Okay.
Mm-hmm. After that, the next thing I would do is, based on how quickly that might happen, very quickly, it might push out a little bit. Then I would probably start looking at hiring, because that's probably one of the next big things that's going to happen. Even if you don't hire until the new year, you can easily go ahead and start looking at what you would have them do.
Okay.
Right. And I would probably save the project management focus, because we're recording this as we're moving into the crazy holiday rush. So I would probably save that until after that rush, when you have a little time between the changing of the years and it slows just a bit for you to think, that's when I would start thinking about it. But you also don't want to be doing that on top of a move into a new location.
No, I don't. And we've had the fall rush since about June 1.
Yeah.
So we're like, yeah, it's been going. And so for you to help me give myself space for that and help prioritize that is amazing.
Yeah.
Because if the move goes forward and everything falls into place, it could very well be timing out at the end of the year. So to get that in and going, and then, okay, let's come back and figure out how to manage our projects could be perfect, especially in January.
And listen, it may be that over the holidays is when you're moving into that location. Don't try to do project management. That might be what we set up as, you know, how I have you do one big goal for each quarter. That might be your one big goal for Q1. Or maybe Q1's one big goal is hiring. Q2 is project management. Because don't think that you still have a project management system right now because you're managing your projects. What you could be doing is writing down and tweaking the things that you want to do better so that when you sit down to look at it, you've already thought about that.
Right.
It's not at all sit down and do it at one time.
Yeah. And I tend to do that. I put too much on my plate at one time. It's the nature of my character and personal and business wise. So it helps a lot. So
the good thing is we know your next big 3 goals, and that's all that right there is enough for an entire 2021 for you.
Good.
Location, staffing, and project management.
Yep.
And so based on how this location comes, that becomes the first quarter.
Right.
Of wherever you are in the year, then you can look at the things that come behind it. And if at that point, project management becomes more important than hiring, we just move it in front of it.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. But you don't have to do it all at one time. You can't. It's too much.
No, and it's very refreshing to flush it out and know that there's a visual plan and it's not overwhelming.
Yeah. Deep breath.
Yeah. It was a big deep breath this last hour and a half.
That's exciting, but you're doing good. You're doing good.
It is exciting.
Well, Tracie, thank you so much for sharing this challenge and letting us talk through it and really kind of look at the details of how we would go about doing that. I appreciate your time and your honesty and transparency as we work through it.
Well, we appreciate you always, and your podcasts are just that for me. They have been for that. So many people with so many different kinds of businesses. I've had several aha moments listening to those or shifted something in my business because of those. So the sharing is phenomenal, and thanks for having me on. I hope it's beneficial to somebody besides me.
Oh, I'm certain that it will be. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tracie, for joining us and sharing your business building journey. Each of us, as we grow our business, will run into some, if not all, of the business challenges that we've been covering on the podcast. Tracie mentioned not doing business alone, and I second that. I am a business coach, and I have a business coach. Inviting someone in to see what you cannot see can really be instrumental in furthering your growth. If you're interested, I would love to have the conversation with you. You can go to scarletthreadconsulting.com and set up a discovery call, and we can hop on and talk. Be intentional about scaling your business and managing it, because profit doesn't happen by accident.